Okay, so if a person has Tawheed, they will go to Jannah irrespective of what their sins are. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't forgive shirk, but He forgives anything lesser than that. And this is the stance in the Aqidah of Sunnah wal Jama'ah, that people will eventually, with Tawheed, will eventually go to Jannah as long as the person dies upon Tawheed. If he dies upon kufr or nifaq or anything like that, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows about this person's affairs. For us, he might be a person in Tawheed, but he might be munafiq, he might have kufr, he might have shirk, may Allah protect us. So these will be preventatives. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, see, the questions you're asking here are questions that can only be answered by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are only going by with what He has told us in order for us to prepare for standing on that day. Essentially, the judgment and the execution of His decree is from Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. He will forgive who He wants and He will punish who He wants. You might see a person on the day of judgment, he might appear to be a really pious person, but he'll be in the hellfire. And the other way around, it might be that a person who is sinful comes and you think this guy's got no chance. Just like we see in the hadith, which is known as the hadith of Bitaqa, his scrolls are laid bare and they extend until the eye can see. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say to him, is there anything that you deny from any of this? He will say no, and he thinks that's it, khalas, that's it. This is my end, I'm going to the hellfire. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will place on the other side, La ilaha illallah. Because of his sincerity, he had a lot of sins, but Allah knows his situation. The judgment is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But what we do know, the people of Tawheed is Jannah. The people of Kufr and Shirk is the hellfire. There are only two parties. Therefore, the people of Tawheed, if they have done bad deeds, eventually, either Allah forgives them right away, or eventually they'll end up in Jannah. But they will end up in Jannah. Right, but now you're asking about abuse. So that's one question. The second question is, what do we do with abuse? People have been abused, they've been oppressed. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will decree with them on the Day of Judgment. If a person has oppressed another person, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has told in the hadith in Sahih Bukhari, that if a person has oppressed another person, then it will be judged and discussed on that day. And if the person hasn't sought an apology and there's something remains of the rights of the other person, he will take his good deeds. If he doesn't have any good deeds to take, then he will release some of his bad deeds, meaning the oppressed person, to the oppressor. Therefore, there are two very separate issues. If you're asking, will a tyrant enter Jannah? Well, if he's got Tawheed, yes, he will enter Jannah. But does that mean he's not going to be questioned and held accountable? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the Ahkam al-Hakimeen, and He is the most just of those who have judgment, subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, two very separate issues. Barakallahu feek.